Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
TVA President and CEO Jeff Lyash on the future of power in Memphis. Tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us as we continue to do the show remotely. And we continue to take a break from coronavirus coverage to cover the big question of whether MLG&W will or should begin to look for another source of power from TVA, where it's gotten its electricity for the past 80 years. To that end, we are very pleased to have today President and CEO Jeff Lyash from TVA. Jeff, thank you for joining us.
Eric, I'm glad to be here today.
Along with Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian. And so we have written a lot, and other folks in town have written a lot about this this whole question. I will note a couple things at the top because it is an incredibly complicated issue that we'll try to walk through as best we can. Last week, we had a couple of advocates, local Memphis advocates, who really want to explore looking at other alternatives to TVA for electricity through MLGW. Next week, President CEO of MLGW, JT Young, will be on the show to talk about where MLGW is in all this. And just to give a little bit of background, and I'll try to do this as accurately as I can, MLGW would have to give 5 years notice to TVA to move to getting power from another source. There is an integrated resource plan that's kind of an assessment of the options and the situation that's being, that MLG&W has commissioned. That plan will be released, I believe, in a week or so. It got pushed back, and then there'll be a public comment phase that goes on about a month. The real question that a lot of people are pushing is whether MISO, which is the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, which is an electric cooperative that stretches from, I believe, Louisiana all the way up to Canada, are they a better alternative or even an alternative, which is a question for a source of power. And the Memphis City Council, of course, Memphis owns MLGW. It approved a first resolution this week asking Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland to get a proposal from MISO, and ACES, the firm that manages the relationship. The board of MLGW got a little annoyed about that. They feel like it's up to them to make that decision, and then the City Council approves. So many moving pieces, many parts to this, but I think it was important to take a minute to set some of that up. Jeff, again, thank you for joining us. My first question, as I mentioned, MLGW has gotten its electricity from TVA for 80 years. It is, I believe, the biggest customer of TVA for electricity. Why do you think there is so much interest in, if not leaving, certainly exploring other options?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me here today. First of all, I'm really glad to be here in Memphis. Had an opportunity to talk to our staff and work on some issues at our Allen plant, which was a big investment for us here. So I'm glad to have the chance to talk to Memphians about these really important issues. And Eric, it is a really important decision because the decision that MLGW in Memphis will take is something that will set your course for quite a long time into the future. You know, as you mentioned, we've been serving Memphis for 80 years. Actually, last week, TVA celebrated its 87th birthday. And really this Valley Public Power model that as of today, we're all engaged in, TVA partnered with MLGW and Memphis, I think is a powerful strategic advantage looking at the future. Our mission 87 years ago, energy at the lowest feasible price, economic development and environmental stewardship, that's a more relevant mission even today than it was then. And power is at the heart of that. And so who you get your power from, reliability, environmental footprint, cost, ability to drive economic development in the future, it's a very important question for Memphis to answer. And, you know, I've been in this business almost 4 decades around the world. I've been here at TVA for a year. And what I've focused on is first seeking to understand. So I actually made my first trip to Memphis or to talk to Memphis leaders before I hired on because I recognized the significance of this process to the community. My third day on the job was here in Memphis, and I've spent the last year listening and learning. And my thanks to the news media, who's asked me really good questions, to people like Bishop Graves and Lynn Evans, former board members, John Ryder, our present board member, talked to the faith-based community. Pastor Norman gave me some excellent advice, Deidre McCall at the NAACP. So I've just learned a lot about the challenges Memphis faces. Where TVA has done well and MLGW supporting you in facing those challenges, and frankly, where we haven't done well, where there are gaps that if we stay partners in the long term, we have to close. This is important for Memphis.
And those gaps, is that why there is this really growing, it's been a year in the making, but really palpable sense of, hey, we need to really look at other options, that this relationship may need to end, both from mostly from a cost point of view. That there are, I mean, some people are talking about $450 million a year in savings, but even $20 million a year in savings, $10 million, those are significant numbers to a city like Memphis, particularly as we go into and eventually come out of this economic condition. So those gaps, is that what is causing people in Memphis to really itch to look at other options?
Yeah, I think that's a significant part of it. And I can spend a little time telling you what I think the gaps are. I must tell you that others have gone down this path and take a look at it. Others in our service territory over the last year or so. Most of those have settled the issue. Basically 90% of our local power companies have opted to adopt a 20-year partnership agreement, which significantly lowers their rates. I'm hoping in the end that's where Memphis will land. But I think a full and transparent vetting of the issues is right, and that's what Memphians need to do. Now, I'll tell you, start off from a great place. TVA across our system delivers energy at lower price than 70% of the utilities in the country. But in Memphis here, which is really important, TVA partnered with MLGW, delivers some of the lowest rates in the country. As a matter of fact, among peer cities, MLGW is the third lowest rate. To do that at an incredible level of reliability has been uninterrupted by TVA in 20 years, 100% reliability. And we do it at an environmental footprint far less than our peers. Our greenhouse gas rate per unit of electricity is 40% less than MISO and getting lower. So you start out in a good position. And the question is, can Memphis do better? Complicated question, and one that has to be very carefully answered.
Let me get Bill, and just to clarify, I believe TVA has offered a 20-year renewal with, is it a 3% reduction? Is that in what we're paying right now?
Yeah, so as we go through the coming weeks, I think it was very important for MLGW and the city to focus on this integrated resource plan and do a comprehensive analysis of what your alternatives and what they would take to implement are. These studies that are cited, these 4 studies, the 450 million, I've read them all, and they are each fundamentally flawed, and those numbers are being misused, and I think it confuses the public. The important place to look, I think, is to the comprehensive study that the Power Supply Advisory Team, MLGW and others have crafted, and use that as the basis to start to talk about what the real options are.
And that's the plan that I believe comes out in a week or two for public comment. Let me go to Bill so he can get in the mix here.
Jeff, is there any scenario in this as this process gets underway with the integrated resource plan and terms are talked? Is there any scenario in which TVA could remain as part of an electric power supply for Memphis Light, Gas, and Water that might involve other entities? Or is this all TVA or nothing?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. That's a good question. Over the coming weeks, TVA really, we have supported the process. You haven't really heard us in public much because we wanted the process to run its course so that the public could have an integrated resource plan to base the discussion on. Now, Bill, you'll begin to hear us talk about our value and what we might do partnered with MLGW. Now, this is a very special place, this Valley Public Power model that we're part of. And so really part of the choice is, do you want to remain a part of that public power model? TVA is not for profit. We're the original electric nonprofit. We focus on people. What we do for Memphis is keep you all engaged with our other 153 local power companies in that model. Under a long-term partnership, we can lower your rate. That offer would save the city about $22.5 million a year, beginning on execution. We have a flexibility provision in that offer where we would assist Memphis in serving some of their own load, help you build solar to serve some of your load, perhaps combined heat and power to diversify the generation system, lower carbon footprint. Done correctly under our flexibility program, we think we could save the city another $15 million a year.
15 or 50, just because
50 or 15, I'm sorry, 15.
Okay, so 22 on top, and then potentially another 15.
Another 15. And Eric, these are conservative estimates, so I don't ever want to promise something where we can't exceed the expectation, but I think those are straightforward ways that the city can lower its price. But I mentioned earlier gaps, Bill. There are other things I think in this public power partnership we MLGW and Memphis could partner on. A few of the things I've learned is that while we've done a good job with economic development here, 40,000 jobs and about $5.5 billion of capital investment since 2012, we can do better. We're already ramping that up. You see Amazon out in Fraser, the expansion of AutoZone's headquarters in downtown Memphis. But I would really love to see TVA and Memphis partner on economic development focused at urban revitalization and addressing some of these blighted areas. I think we can be very effective at targeting our economic development programs there. So energy burden and involving others in that. Energy burden is another issue that I think is very real for Memphis, and we can go after helping you address that. Just next week, we're going to be doing some energy audits of schools, and I think an LED lighting project for the 200 schools in Memphis. So in answer to your question, Bill, we're not going to, because of the public power model, what we offer, we don't do what's called partial requirements, but we can put on the table a partnership that drives after Memphis's issues, lowers your price, and helps you generate some of your own energy, predominantly with renewables.
Mm-hmm. And so that's something I haven't heard before, because MW generating its own power has become another part of this discussion. And of course, I think that's the one thing that maybe there is some agreement on, is that if MLGW were to generate its own power, that's about an $8 billion expense for it. Is that the estimate?
Yeah, I think, Bill, very technical issues and sometimes difficult to understand. You know, we talk about the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, MISO. One of the things you need to realize is MISO doesn't own a single generating station, a mile of transmission line, no linemen and bucket trucks, no plant operators. It's a market facilitator. It does a very good job at it. By the way, I've traded with MISO over the years. But the members of MISO have to invest capital to build assets that they bring with them to MISO. And so that will drive Memphis to build the transmission and generation necessary to join MISO and then take the risk of trading off of that. That's a viable solution. It can be done. It takes a lot of capital. It takes a long time. And you have to go into it very mindful of the embedded risks.
All right. Before I send it back to Eric, let me talk to you about the Allen plant, which opened in 2018. State-of-the-art $1 billion plant. What happens to that if the Memphis Light, Gas, and Water and TVA relationship comes to an end? It's your plant. What do you do with it in those circumstances?
Bill, that plant, with respect to the combined cycle, that plant and our transmission system are built to serve 10 million people of the Tennessee Valley. And that Allen plant certainly serves Memphis, but it also serves the rest of our service territory. It's a vital asset. So that plant remains a part of TVA's system. And we'll be glad to be doing business here in the Memphis area, even if we're not your supplier at that Allen site. If we remain partners, one of the things that could change there at that Allen site, you all know we're committed to decommissioning and dismantling the old coal plant and removing the coal ash, doing it exactly right. And we're going to do that regardless of whether we're partners in the future or not. But there's a real opportunity there to accelerate that effort, disposition that plant to the city, and support your port project, which could be billions of dollars to the Memphis economy. So, Bill, that's a resource that belongs to all the people of the Valley, and that resource will stay serving them for a long time.
Let me, I mentioned, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Memphis is the MLGW, I said Memphis, MLGW interchangeably, is the largest customer to TVA. What percentage of revenue does that represent?
Eric, it varies year to year.
Sure,
it's generally 8 to 10% of revenue.
So what would that mean to you all to lose that level? I mean, that's a big chunk of revenue, and you are a nonprofit, but you operate, with you're a business on some level, right? I mean, you've got to make the books work. You've got to make everything balance. So to lose that level of revenue would be a big hit.
Yeah, well, Eric, I don't really focus on that. I think TVA has been around for 87 years. We're an incredibly strong performing company, strong balance sheet, top quartile in almost every metric. And so we can sustain ourselves through difficult times or events. But my focus isn't on that. My focus is on delivering value to the people of Memphis right now. The job of the CEO of TVA is to make the lives of the people who live in the Tennessee Valley better. That's very distinct from companies that are for profit as opposed to TVA. We want to keep Memphis as a customer because we think this public power model is an advantage, and because we have 80 years of history, and that's where we're focused. And so what we're going to try to do over the next number of weeks as you look at your alternatives is demonstrate that we can help you lower price, but we can drive economic development, energy burden reduction, renewables, economics in a way that adds tremendous value over the next 20 years to this community.
Well, but I can imagine there are at least some people listening who say that all sounds great. I mean, there's new information in this, and the potential $22 million in savings per year, plus the potential other 15 increased economic development incentives. I mean, I think most people would listen and hear that is very attractive. But I imagine that some people would say, well, why aren't we getting that now? I mean, what changes by signing a 20-year contract that we get those level of savings and that level of investment? Why, in other words, haven't we been getting that in the past?
Yeah, Eric, it's an excellent question. I think it's at the heart of this. I got to start out by saying Memphis, MLGW, and TVA have been great partners for a long time. As I say, together right now, we're delivering a very environmentally sound product at a very competitive rate. Memphis's rates are in the top, the cheapest decile in the country, as are the industrial rates. So, and we've gotten tremendous economic. So it's gone well. It hasn't gone well enough. And the reason these gaps exist, as I've listened and learned over the years, is we, over the decades, TVA, MLG, Memphis, drifted away from being partners in the success of this community. And we became parties to transactions. And I think that's a fine way of doing business, but it's not the way this public power model should work. So in direct answer to your question, I think we have delivered results, but I don't think any of us have lived up to our potential. And that's where we need to go. And in order to do that, the reason we put a 20-year partnership on the table is because to solve some of the problems we're talking about, to really drive price to the lowest point feasible, to make this a green city, an energy efficient city, a vibrant economy, This takes 20 years worth of commitment to make the kind of investments that have to be made in order to realize that vision.
We have about 6 minutes left. Let me go back to Bill.
And Jeff, that 20-year investment, again, from what you said earlier, includes helping Memphis Light Gas and Water get into the power generation business at some level, correct?
Yeah, what we see is demand from customers, industries that want to see more distributed generation, want to see more renewables, and we are supportive of making that happen. But let me give you an example, Bill. We just signed a 20-year agreement with the city of Knoxville, and one of the things Knoxville wanted to do was site 212 megawatts of solar that would basically allow them to power their government operations with solar power, and so we're doing that. In Nashville, Vanderbilt University wanted 35 megawatts of solar as part of their environmental objectives. National Electric really wasn't in the position to do that. And so we teamed with them and we made that happen. And we'd like to do that with Memphis.
In the previous solar projects that covered, the solar power was bought from TVA. So if Memphis Light Gas and Water generates its power, does it then go through the TVA system, or how does that work? Can Light Gas and Water use that power it generates directly? Yeah.
There's a range of solutions here, Bill. As in most of life, there's not one right answer. Generally, there's a range of options at work. So in this case, MLGW could, let's say, site 200 megawatts of its own solar behind the meter, if you will, that doesn't flow through the TVA system because of real estate constraints and system requirements. If MLGW wanted to get to 10% solar penetration, we maybe could build some of that on the TVA system and route it to you. So there doesn't have to be one answer here. There's a lot of options.
All right. We hear so many competing claims from so many different directions. Those of us who don't work in the industry or work for one of the players in this, rates are lower. Everybody says they will have the lowest rates for us. Is this just about rates, though?
No, Bill. So, first of all, I don't want to be seen as selling Memphis on TVA. I want to serve Memphis, but what I really want is Memphis to make the right decision. And you'll have a lot of people promising you things. Many of them can't deliver what they promise. One of the distinctions with TVA is when we make the promise, we'll deliver it. We're here, we have the resources, we have the size, we have the experience, we can deliver it. So as you look at other alternatives, be careful. Look at them, test them, be cautious. And just to kind of give a piece of advice, having been through these planning processes many times, I've read those 4 studies. I know people put this $450 million number up there. Don't forget, each of those studies is incomplete. They were done for a purpose. There's a little piece of the pie that's evaluated, but none of them address the whole pie. The $450 million number comes from a study by Nuclear Development LLC that relied on completing a 40-year-old abandoned nuclear plant on a cost and schedule that I just don't think is credible. That's been dismissed. So I think what I would encourage folks to do is support MLGW, support the IRP process, look at the results of that, test it, ask questions about it, ask questions about TVA. Understand, Bill, not just the price, but the risk of investing $8 billion and having it go wrong. Projects go long, costs escalate, borrowing costs go up. You take that risk, but do it with your eyes wide open.
Let me just with a couple minutes here, and I apologize for interrupting the Zoom delay and so on, but we did have the group, the $450 million for Memphis is the name of the group. They always want to clarify that they're not part of the effort to restart the nuclear plant in Alabama, but they were on last week. It's on the website, on the Daily Memphian site and the WKNO site. They raised a couple of questions I want if you could quickly address. They had real concerns that Siemens is running is a consultant running this assessment plan, but Siemens is also in the power business. They are a customer of yours, right? I mean, they supply services to you separate from this analysis. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a business relationship with Siemens, a completely different division.
Okay.
We basically buy power equipment from. Let me, though, get to the heart of the issue. I think as a community, working to discredit various parties without a good reason, I think is a distraction from the fundamental discussion, which is what's best for Memphis. If you want to understand how to build an integrated resource plan so that you can make a clear decision, you need to hire someone who knows what they're doing to help you. That's what Siemens is. We've had no contact with Siemens over their efforts here. There is no conflict in this relationship.
Okay.
Whatever Siemens comes out with, as long as it's got a good sound technical basis, I'm happy with it. Because what I want is a really clear vetting of the issues.
Right. In your nuclear obligations, that was another issue they've raised, that TVA has a bunch of upgrades, billions of dollars in upgrades it's going to have to do to their nuclear plants. Is that a financial concern for you? And again, you've got about 15 seconds.
Our nuclear plants provide incredibly low cost, reliable power. They're going to run for another 30 years. This is one of the largest and best run fleets in the country. Those nuclear plants are an asset to the people here in the Valley. There's no liability here.
Okay. Again, we could probably talk about that for 20 minutes, but Jeff, thank you so much for coming on. Sorry, we ran out of time. And that is all the time we have this week. You can get this episode and all episodes of Behind the Headlines on the WKNO website or on the Daily Memphian site. Again, join us next week. JT Young, President and CEO of MLG&W, will join us to talk further about this issue. Thanks and good night.